Have you ever heard of the dark web? People call it the hidden internet, a place where you can buy drugs, guns, even stolen identities. But what if I told you, the darkest secret of all is not what's sold, but who? This is not just about money. This is about children. Innocent lives, traded like objects, trapped in videos no human should ever see. And this is where our story begins. His name was Michael Hayes. A good man. A father, a husband, and a police officer who believed the world could still be a fair place. But one night, a single phone call changed his life forever. It was late, the city quiet, when Michael picked up his phone. On the other end, a shaky voice whispered just a few words before cutting off, "It's kids, the dark web, the van," then silence. No name, no details, just a broken clue. Most officers would have ignored it. After all, too many prank calls came in every week. But Michael felt something different in his chest. His instincts told him this wasn't a joke. This was real. So he called two of his most trusted partners, men who had worked cases with him for years. Without backup, without clearance, they drove into the night toward the warehouse district. The air was damp, the streets empty, the kind of night where even the streetlights looked tired. The warehouse stood at the edge of the river, abandoned, forgotten. Windows shattered, walls covered with graffiti. But as Michael pushed the rusty door open, he felt it, the silence was wrong. Too heavy. Too still. Inside, the smell of oil and damp would fill the air. Their flashlights cut through the dark, sweeping across empty crates and broken furniture. For a moment, it felt like another dead lead. Then Michael's beam froze. A camera. Not a security camera, but a filming setup. Wires ran across the floor into a laptop still glowing faintly. Michael crouched, touched the mouse, and the screen came alive. And what he saw, stopped his breath. Children. On the screen, small children locked in cages, crying, shaking. Some too weak to even move. A live stream. And at the bottom of the video, words scrolled quickly, messages from faceless viewers hidden across the world. People bidding. Paying. Laughing. Michael felt his stomach turn. His hands shook. This wasn't just crime, this was evil. He wanted to smash the laptop into pieces, but he forced himself to stay calm. Evidence. They needed evidence. He whispered to his team, "Record everything. We shut this down tonight." But then, the screen flickered. A message appeared, slowly, one word at a time, "We see you, officer." Michael's heart froze. The laptop's camera light turned red. Someone on the other side was watching them. Before he could react, the warehouse lights burst on, flooding the room. Engines roared outside. Trucks. Doors slammed. Heavy boots echoed in the shadows. They weren't alone. Gunfire shattered the silence. Bullets ripped through the crate. Michael and his men ducked, firing back blindly. This wasn't a gang. These weren't random thugs. This was an army, guarding something much bigger than money. This was the dark web's empire, and Michael had just walked into its heart. He pressed his back against the wall, chest pounding. He knew two things at that moment. First, he was outnumbered. Second, his life, his family, everything he loved, would never be safe again. And for those listening right now, don't think of this as just a story. Because right now, as you sit in your room, somewhere out there on the dark web, this is happening. A child is crying. A child is waiting for someone like Michael to find them. Before I take you further, let me say this: if stories like this matter to you, if you want the truth about the darkness people try to hide, then stay with us. Support this channel. Because the more voices we have, the harder it is for evil to stay hidden. Michael's fight had just begun. But here's the truth about fights like his: the enemy isn't always in front of you. Sometimes, the sharpest knives come from behind, from the people you trust the most. When dawn broke that morning, Michael walked into the precinct with blood on his shirt, bruises on his arms, and evidence in his hand. A hard drive he had ripped from that warehouse computer, proof that children were being streamed and sold across the dark web. His heart burned with determination. He thought this was it, the beginning of justice. He pictured the chief standing up, slamming his fist on the table, calling every agency in the country. He imagined raids, arrests, children being freed. He imagined hope. But reality? Reality was colder than the warehouse floor he had crawled across the night before. The chief barely looked at him. He didn't ask if Michael was hurt. Didn't ask about the children. He only asked one thing: who authorized your operation? Michael blinked, stunned. Sir, we found a live stream. Kids in cages. The dark web, the trafficking. The chief cut him off, voice sharp. That wasn't my question. The room went silent. Michael's two partners stood frozen, their eyes darting between him and the man behind the desk. The chief leaned back, his face unreadable. Then slowly, he picked up the hard drive from Michael's hand. He held it like it was nothing more than a piece of trash. You're lucky you're alive, Hayes, he muttered. Don't push it. Michael felt his chest tighten. Sir, you don't understand. This isn't drugs. This isn't stolen cars. This is kids. They are recording them, selling them, live on the dark web. If we act now, we can save them. The chief's eyes hardened. Drop it. 2 words. Just 2 words. But they were heavier than any bullet Michael had dodged the night before. He shook his head slowly. Sir, no. I can't. The chief leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper that sounded more like a threat than advice. You don't know who you're dealing with. You think this is some gang? This goes higher. Judges. Politicians. People who can bury you with one phone call. Walk away, Hayes. For your sake. For your family's sake. That last word, family, hit Michael like a knife. For a second, his mind went to his wife's smile, to his children's laughter. He imagined them in danger, their names whispered in the same dark web chat rooms he had seen the night before. A chill ran down his spine. The chief didn't wait for his answer. He slid the hard drive into his desk drawer, locked it, and scribbled something on a file. This case is closed. Go home. Get some rest. Michael stood there, his fists clenched so tight his knuckles turned white. He wanted to scream, to break the desk in half, to force them to see what he had seen. But when he looked around the room, he saw the truth written in the faces of his colleagues. Some avoided his eyes. Others gave him the slightest shake of the head, a warning not to push further. The silence was louder than gunfire. That evening, Michael drove home with the weight of betrayal pressing on his chest. He tried to smile for his kids, tried to eat dinner, but his mind kept going back to the cages, the tears, the voices begging to be saved. Later that night, as the house grew quiet, he stepped outside for air. That's when he saw it. A folded note tucked under his car's windshield. He pulled it free, unfolded the paper, and felt his blood turn cold. Just one line, your family is next. His hands shook as he scanned the dark street, but no one was there. Only silence. Michael's fight had begun, yes. But now it wasn't just his fight. The darkness had followed him home. And if you're hearing this right now, I want you to think about something. What would you do? If you knew the truth, if you saw children being sold on the dark web, but the people above you told you to stay silent, would you obey? Or would you risk everything, even your family, for justice? Michael had to make that choice. And in the days to come, he would discover just how deep the corruption ran, and just how far he was willing to go for revenge. Before I take you further, let me pause. Because stories like Michael's are more than just stories, they're warnings. And if you want to hear the truth about the darkness people don't want you to see, make sure you stay with us. Support this channel. Share it. Because silence protects the guilty, but stories like this, they give power back to the innocent. Michael didn't know it yet, but his war was no longer against strangers on the dark web. It was against his own system. And wars like that are never clean. Michael sat in his dark living room that night, the note still clutched in his hand. His children slept upstairs, his wife's soft breathing echoing from the bedroom. But Michael? He didn't close his eyes once. He sat in silence, staring out the window, waiting for movement in the shadows. He had been betrayed by his own chief, ignored by his brothers in uniform, and now threatened by the very monsters he was trying to fight. But as the night stretched into morning, something strange happened. His phone buzzed. An unknown number. At first, he thought it was another threat. His hand hovered over the screen, debating whether to answer. Finally, he pressed accept. Detective Hayes. The voice was calm, female, but carried a weight, a seriousness. Yes, Michael replied, his tone guarded. You don't know me, she continued. And you won't see my name. But you need to hear this. The van. The one used to move the children. It's still active. It hasn't stopped. And if you want proof, check the dark web forums tonight. The stream is scheduled for midnight. Michael's pulse spiked. Who is this? I can't tell you, she whispered. Not yet. But I've been tracking them for years. I know what you saw in that warehouse. I know your chief buried the evidence. And I know you can't trust the system anymore. You're not alone, detective. But if you want the truth, you'll have to fight for it yourself. And just like that, the line went dead. Michael sat frozen, phone pressed to his ear long after the call ended. His heart raced. He wanted to dismiss it, to think it was another trick. But the voice, it was steady, certain, not like the threats. Whoever she was, she knew things only someone deep inside the investigation could know. At midnight, he sat in front of his own laptop, shaking as he typed into the hidden browser he never thought he'd touch. He entered the dark web forum address the caller had sent by text just before disappearing. The screen flickered to life, and there it was, another live stream. Children. Trapped. Crying. A van in the background, its license plate barely visible in the frame. Michael leaned forward, memorizing every detail. He wanted to look away, wanted to throw up, but he forced himself to watch. The more he saw, the stronger his rage grew. This wasn't fantasy. This wasn't rumor. It was happening, right now, in his city. He snapped photos of the plate, the surroundings, the faces in the frame. He knew he couldn't take this to his chief. He couldn't go to the courts. He couldn't even trust the FBI. The corruption ran too deep. But he could gather his own evidence. He could build his own case. And maybe, he could find this mysterious voice who knew so much. The next morning, he drove back to the precinct, but not to file a report. No, he went only to watch, to study. He noticed whispers between officers, files disappearing off desks, and one man from another division leaving with a bag heavier than it should have been. Michael realized something terrifying: some of the men in uniform weren't just covering it up. They were part of it. That night, the phone rang again. Same blocked number. Same calm, urgent voice. You have enemies in your own house, detective, she said. But you also have allies. People who've been waiting for someone brave enough to fight. Ex-officers. Journalists. Even men who once worked for them but turned away. You can't do this alone. But together, maybe we can bring them down. Michael's throat tightened. He wanted to believe her. He wanted to believe there was still good out there, still people willing to fight. "Why me?" he asked, voice cracking. "Because you saw the children," she whispered. "And once you see, you can never unsee." The line went dead again. Michael sat back, shaking, his mind racing. He didn't have answers yet. But he had something new, hope. Fragile, dangerous hope. And for those of you listening right now, maybe you feel what Michael felt. That pit in your stomach when you realize evil doesn't hide in fairy tales, it hides online, behind screens, in places like the dark web. And sometimes the system won't save you. Sometimes the system is the problem. But heroes are born in silence, in moments when no one is watching. And Michael Hayes was about to be reborn. Before I take you to the next part of his journey, let me say this: if stories like this move you, if you want to hear the truth about the shadows people try to hide, make sure you support this channel. Share it. Because these aren't just stories, they're warnings. And together, our voices can break through the silence. Michael didn't know it yet, but the war he thought he lost was only beginning. And this time, he wouldn't be fighting alone. Michael didn't sleep that night. His mind replayed the stream he had witnessed, those trembling children trapped in that dark van. He kept hearing the soft but steady voice of the mysterious caller, "Once you see, you can never unsee." Morning came, but the world didn't look the same. Every smile he passed on the street felt fake. Every officer's handshake at the precinct felt poisoned. He couldn't look at them without wondering, who among you is part of this? Who among you is feeding these monsters on the dark web? He couldn't trust anyone inside the building, but he knew he couldn't fight alone either. He had to find allies, carefully, silently. That afternoon, he drove to a quiet diner on the edge of town. A man was already waiting inside, hunched in a booth by the window. His hair had grayed early, his badge long since turned in. It was Jack Carter, once one of the most respected detectives in the city, until corruption forced him out. "Michael Hayes," Jack said as he slid into the booth. "I heard you stirred a hornet's nest." Michael leaned forward. "You heard right. They shut down my case. Files gone. Evidence destroyed. My family's been threatened. But I'm not done. I need help." Jack didn't blink. "Help? Or suicide?" Michael lowered his voice. "It's bigger than drugs, bigger than gangs. It's children. The dark web, Jack. They're using vans to move them. I saw it. Live. I have proof." Jack's jaw tightened, his eyes hardening. He didn't speak for a long time, just stared at Michael as if measuring his soul. Finally, he nodded. "Then you're going to need more than me." Over the next week, Michael moved like a ghost. He worked shifts at the precinct like nothing had changed, but outside, he was building something dangerous. He met with an old cybercrimes agent who had been pushed out for digging too deep into encrypted networks. He spoke to a young journalist, fiery and fearless, who had been writing about missing children for years but had never been allowed to publish the truth. And slowly, a team formed. They didn't meet in offices or police stations. They met in abandoned garages, empty warehouses, coffee shops no one cared about. Each brought something different: contacts, hacking skills, inside knowledge. Each had their own reason for wanting revenge. But as Michael built his circle, the other side moved too. One night, while driving home, Michael noticed a black SUV trailing him. He slowed down, turned, sped up, but the SUV never left. By the time he reached his driveway, the car was gone, but his heart was pounding. He knew. They were watching. The next day, a package arrived at his door. Inside was a USB stick and a single note: "We know you're still digging." He plugged it into a burner laptop, his stomach in knots. On the screen, a video loaded. It was his wife, walking their kids to school. Filmed from across the street. Another clip, his daughter playing soccer in the park. His son riding his bike in the neighborhood. The video ended with words in red across the screen, "Back off. Or they disappear." Michael's hands shook. His worst fear had come alive. The criminals weren't just watching him. They were circling his family. That night, he sat in silence, staring at his children at the dinner table. Their laughter, their innocence, it was everything these men wanted to destroy. He clenched his fists under the table. They wanted him scared. They wanted him to quit. But instead, they gave him something else. Fire. And you, listening right now, you know that moment when fear turns into resolve? When someone takes everything you love and threatens to break it, and instead of giving up, you feel stronger? That was Michael Hayes in that moment. Because the more they pushed him, the more certain he became, he was going to bring them down. All of them. But he knew one thing now, this wasn't just about evidence anymore. This was war. And as this war began to rise, let me pause for a second. If you've followed Michael's fight so far, and if your heart is pounding the way his was, don't just sit there, support this channel. Subscribe, share, because the world doesn't always show us the truth, but here, we bring it out of the shadows. Stories like this remind us, silence protects the guilty. And together, we can break that silence. Michael didn't know it yet, but the mysterious caller, the one who led him into the dark web for the first time, was about to step out of the shadows. And when she did, everything Michael thought he knew about trust, loyalty, and betrayal was going to change forever. Michael barely slept. Every creak of the house, every car passing outside, felt like a threat. He kept replaying the video on the USB, each frame burning into his mind. His family was no longer just in danger, they were targets. The next morning, he drove the kids to school himself. His wife looked at him with worried eyes, but he said nothing. How could he tell her? How could he explain that monsters from the shadows of the internet had their names, their faces, their every move? That afternoon, his burner phone rang again. The same blocked number. Detective Hayes, the voice whispered, calm but urgent, "I know what they sent you. And I know you're still in. You didn't quit." Michael's jaw tightened. "Who are you? Why should I trust you?" "Because I'm the reason you're alive," she said flatly. "Last night, when you saw that SUV following you, they weren't just watching. They were ready. I sent an anonymous tip that forced them to pull back. If I hadn't, you'd be dead." Michael froze. His mind raced. Could it be true? He wanted to demand proof, to yell, to demand answers. But deep down, he believed her. "Then stop hiding," he said, voice low but firm. "If we're going to do this, I need to see you." A pause. "Then, tomorrow night. Pier 17. Midnight. Come alone." Michael didn't tell his wife where he was going. He didn't tell Jack, or the others. Some things you had to do yourself. When midnight came, the pier was silent, the ocean black under the moonlight. Michael's footsteps echoed on the wood as he walked toward the end of the dock. For a moment, he thought he'd been played, that no one was coming. Then he saw her. A woman stepped out from the shadows. She was young, maybe mid-30s, her face pale under the dim light. She wore a hooded coat, and her eyes darted around nervously. But when she looked at him, her gaze was steady. "My name is Sarah," she whispered. "I was a crime reporter. Years ago, I started following missing children cases. That's when I found them, the network. They called me crazy. They buried my stories. And when I got too close, they destroyed my career. But I didn't stop." She pulled out a small flash drive and placed it in his hand. "Everything I have, names, accounts, forum screenshots, van routes, it's all here. I've been collecting it for years. But I couldn't do anything with it. Not alone. That's why I called you. Michael's chest tightened. He felt the weight of the drive, heavier than any weapon he'd ever held. If this is real, he said slowly, then why me? Her voice cracked. Because they killed my brother. He was only 12. They took him, used him, and when I tried to fight back, they made him vanish. The police called it an accident. But I know the truth. I've lived with it every day. And now, I want them to pay. Michael's throat tightened. For a moment, he saw not just a journalist, but someone like him. Someone who had lost everything and had nothing left but rage. He nodded. Then we fight together. And that night, for the first time, Michael's war didn't feel like his alone. He had Sarah. He had Jack. He had others waiting in the shadows. Piece by piece, the broken began to gather. But the criminals weren't sleeping. That same night, across town, a meeting was taking place in a mansion with guards at every gate. Men in suits, men in robes, men who smiled in public but thrived in darkness. They spoke of Michael Hayes by name. He's digging again, one of them said. Then bury him, another replied. They raised glasses of expensive whiskey and laughed, as if the destruction of a man and his family was nothing more than a business move. And you, listening right now, you might be thinking, how could people like this exist? How could they laugh while children suffer? But that's the truth of the dark web. It isn't technology. It isn't just codes and forums. It's people. Monsters wearing human faces. And if we turn away, they win. Michael didn't turn away. He looked into the abyss and stepped forward. And as Sarah joined his side, the war began to take shape. Before I take you deeper into that war, let me ask you something, are you with him? If you are, support this channel. Share it. Because stories like Michael's aren't just entertainment, they're reminders that silence is the weapon of the guilty. Together, we shine light in the darkest corners. The next chapter of Michael's fight was about to begin. He had evidence. He had allies. And he had enemies who wanted him gone. The question was, who would strike first? The night Michael met Sarah at the pier, something shifted inside him. For weeks he had felt alone. Abandoned by his department, betrayed by his chief, hunted by men who operated in shadows. But now, with Sarah at his side, carrying years of evidence carved from the darkest corners of the web, Michael felt something he hadn't in a long time. He felt power. But power was dangerous. And in this war, every move mattered. The next morning, Michael sat in Jack Carter's garage, the safe house where his small team gathered. Jack leaned back in his chair, cigarette smoke curling toward the ceiling, while Sarah stood across the room, connecting her laptop to a dusty projector. This, she said, voice firm, is what they've built. The screen flickered on, revealing a map of the city. Dozens of red pins glowed across it. Every pin is a confirmed location linked to the network. Warehouses, safe houses, transfer points. Most of them are businesses on the outside, trucking companies, cleaning services, even charity fronts. But on the dark web, they're different. Their accounts. Storage. Streams. Michael leaned forward, fists clenched. Each pin wasn't just a place. Each pin was a child, a family destroyed. They use encrypted forums, Sarah continued. Invites only. Crypto payments. Each stream is hosted for buyers around the world. They move fast, never in one place long enough to get caught. But last week, one of their servers slipped. And that's when I traced the van you saw. She clicked again. A grainy screenshot appeared, license plate numbers, barely visible, but there. Michael's chest tightened. Proof. Real proof. Jack stubbed out his cigarette. So, what's the plan? You're telling me we take all this to the DA and they'll magically care? Forget it. They'll bury it like they buried you, Mike. The system's rotten. Michael shook his head. Not the system. The people in it. If we can't use them, then we go around them. We use the media. We use the people watching. We take it to the court of public opinion. Sarah nodded. That's why I called you. They can silence me. They can silence Jack. But they can't silence all of us. Not if we hit them from every angle. And right there, the plan was born. Not a police case. Not a court case. A war waged in the open, with the truth as their weapon. But the network wasn't blind. That same night, as Michael drove home, headlights flared in his rearview mirror. He sped up, heart pounding, the road twisting through the outskirts of the city. Suddenly, another car appeared from the side street, cutting him off. His tires screeched. For a second, he thought this was it. But luck, no, maybe fate, intervened. A delivery truck barreled out of a side alley, smashing into the car that had cut him off. Metal twisted, sparks flew, screams echoed in the night. Michael didn't stop to look. He slammed the gas and didn't slow down until he was safe. When he finally pulled into his driveway, his hands were trembling so hard he could barely turn off the ignition. They had tried to kill him. Not threaten. Not scare. Kill. He walked inside, straight to his wife, pulling her into his arms. She didn't understand why his hands were shaking, why his eyes burned with rage. But he knew. They weren't just playing anymore. This was all-out war. And you, listening right now, imagine that. Imagine being hunted because you refuse to stay silent. Imagine knowing the people who should protect you are the same ones protecting the criminals. That's the world Michael Hayes lived in. That's the fight he chose. But instead of breaking him, each attack only sharpened him. His enemies thought fear would make him quit. They were wrong. Fear made him stronger. Before I take you to the next part, let me remind you, if you're still here, it means the story has you hooked. Don't forget to support this channel. Subscribe, share, comment, because stories like this don't just entertain. They remind us that truth matters, even when it's buried in the darkest places. And together, we can make sure it's never buried again. And together, we can make sure it's never buried again. Michael didn't know it yet, but the attempt on his life was only the beginning. The next strike wouldn't be aimed at him. It would be aimed at the people he loved most. And when that moment came, fate would decide whether his family lived, or vanished into the same shadows he was fighting to destroy. Michael thought he was ready for anything. He thought the threats, the surveillance, even the failed assassination attempt on the road had hardened him. But nothing could have prepared him for what came next. It started on an ordinary Saturday morning. The sun was bright, the air calm, his children laughing as they chased each other in the yard. For a brief moment, life felt almost normal. Michael stood at the porch, sipping coffee, watching them. For the first time in weeks, he let himself breathe. Then, his phone buzzed. A message. No words, just a video. He tapped it open, and his heart stopped. On the screen, a live feed appeared. His wife. His children. That very moment, playing in the yard. But the camera wasn't his. Someone was filming them right then, from the street, from the shadows. And then the message appeared across the feed, "We warned you. Today, they disappear." Michael's coffee cup fell from his hand, shattering on the porch. He ran forward, shouting his children's names, just as a black van screeched around the corner. The doors flew open. Masked men jumped out, sprinting toward the yard. His wife screamed, grabbing the children, pulling them back. Michael's heart hammered as he drew his gun, aiming, shouting, but he was too far. Time slowed. He saw his daughter's terrified face. His son frozen in shock. The men closing in, faster, faster. And then fate intervened. Out of nowhere, a neighbor's dog burst through the fence, barking and lunging at the masked men. They stumbled, shouting, one falling to the ground. In that split second of chaos, Michael reached them. His gun roared, the shots cracking the morning air. The men scrambled, dragging one of their own, diving back into the van. Tires screeched, smoke filled the street, and the vehicle vanished as quickly as it came. Michael dropped to his knees, clutching his children, holding his wife tight. His hands shook so badly he could barely breathe. They were safe, but only by chance. A barking dog, a split second of distraction, was all that stood between life and unthinkable loss. Later that night, after the children finally fell asleep, Michael sat alone in the dark. His hands covered his face. Rage burned in his chest, hotter than ever before. They had crossed the line. They hadn't just threatened his family, they had tried to steal them. He whispered to himself, voice trembling but steady, no more. No more running. No more waiting. It ends now. And as he said those words, he realized something. This fight wasn't just about justice anymore. It wasn't just about the dark web, or the children trapped in vans. It was personal. And personal wars are the ones that never stop until blood is spilled. And you, listening right now, imagine being him. Imagine standing on your porch, watching strangers try to drag your children away into the shadows, knowing they would vanish forever. Imagine the rage, the helplessness, the fire that would ignite inside you. That fire is Michael Hayes now. And from that moment on, nothing could put it out. Before we continue, let me remind you, if this story grips you the way it grips me telling it, don't let go. Support this channel, share this story, subscribe. Because what Michael is fighting against isn't fiction, it's built from truths people try to bury. And stories like this are how we drag those truths back into the light. Michael didn't know it yet, but the attack on his family was the criminal's biggest mistake. Because instead of breaking him, it gave him a weapon more dangerous than any gun, any badge, any law. It gave him fury. And fury, once unleashed, can't be stopped. The next step of his journey wouldn't be defense. It would be offense. Michael was done waiting for attacks. From here on out, he would be the one striking first. They tried to take his children. They thought fear would silence him. But instead, they unlocked something inside Michael Hayes that had been waiting in the dark all along. Revenge. Michael didn't sleep that night. He sat at the kitchen table, the same table where his family ate dinner, where his kids once colored pictures, where normal life used to happen. But now the table was covered with maps, files, photos, and weapons. His badge sat in the middle, collecting dust, because tonight he wasn't a cop. Tonight, he was a father ready for war. By dawn, his house wasn't a home, it was a war room. The team gathered one by one. Old friends from the force, men and women who still believed in him. They didn't need promises, they didn't ask questions. They came because they had seen the news, they had heard about the attack, and they knew Michael Hayes was a man who wouldn't quit. And then there was Sarah. The reporter. She wasn't like the others. She wasn't a soldier or an officer. But when she walked into that room, holding her laptop, her eyes told the truth, she was carrying weapons too. Not guns. Not knives. But secrets. She dropped a USB drive on the table. This, she said softly, is what they're killing for. And it's worse than you think. Michael leaned forward, his jaw tight. Sarah plugged the drive into her laptop, the screen flickered, and then the files opened. Videos. Hundreds of them. The room fell silent. The images on the screen were too dark, too cruel, too unbearable to describe. Children, stolen from vans, forced into hell. The recordings were for sale, hidden deep in the dark web, bought and traded like currency by monsters who wore human faces. One of the officers looked away, tears burning his eyes. Another cursed under his breath. Michael's fists clenched so tight the knuckles turned white. Sarah's voice broke the silence. This isn't just one gang. It's a network. They've been using the dark web to share these videos. The same network that put Michael's name on their hit list. And there's more. She clicked again, opening a folder labeled Inside Source. Michael frowned. What's that? Sarah hesitated, her eyes flicking toward him, then toward the others. It's the reason you were suspended. The reason they framed you. There's someone inside the system. A mole. Feeding them information. The air grew colder. Everyone exchanged sharp, nervous glances. A mole. That explained everything, the raids that failed, the suspects who escaped, the ambush on Michael's family. Someone on the inside had been protecting the criminals all along. Michael's voice was low, dangerous. Who? Sarah didn't answer yet. She closed the laptop, locking the truth back inside. I'll tell you when it's time. But know this, they're watching us. Every move. Every step. And if we're going to win, we need to hit first. For the first time in weeks, Michael felt clarity. The fear was gone. The doubt was gone. All that remained was purpose. He looked at each face in the room, his team, his friends, Sarah, and said the words that changed everything. We take them down. All of them. No mercy. The room erupted with nods, with determination, with fire. The plan was born that night. They would follow the money on the dark web, track the vans, expose the network, and tear it apart piece by piece. But there was still one question haunting Michael's mind. Who betrayed him? Who was the ghost inside the system, feeding the criminals information? That answer, Sarah promised, would come soon. But it would not be easy. And for you listening right now, don't move. Because from here, the fight turns darker, sharper, more dangerous. If you've been hooked till now, this is where you'll hold your breath and pray Michael survives. Stories like this are why I built this channel, to shine a light on shadows most people refuse to see. If you believe in that fight, subscribe, support, and keep watching. Because next, Michael Hayes doesn't just fight back, he strikes first. They thought Michael Hayes would hide. They thought fear would chain him down. But they were wrong. This time, he wasn't running. This time, the hunters were about to become the hunted. The night was heavy with silence as Michael's team rolled into the abandoned shipping yard. Rusted containers lined the lot like tombstones, shadows stretched across the cracked pavement, and the air smelled of oil and dust. This was the drop point. This was where the vans came, trading lives in exchange for money and power. Michael stood in the dark, bulletproof vest under his jacket, his face set like stone. Around him, his old squad moved with precision, men and women who had once trusted the system, but now trusted only him. Sarah crouched by the van, her laptop balanced on her knees, tracking signals from the dark web. 2 minutes, she whispered, her eyes glued to the code racing across the screen. The van is coming. And the buyers, they're already here. Michael's heart pounded, but his mind was cold, sharp. This wasn't just a rescue. This was proof. Proof of everything the higher-ups had denied, hidden, buried. And then headlights cut through the night. A black van rolled into the yard, its engine humming low, its windows tinted. Behind it, 2 SUVs followed, carrying the buyers, the kind of men who wore suits over their sins, who hid their crimes behind expensive watches and political power. Michael signaled. His team moved into position, crouched behind containers, weapons ready. Sarah's hands flew across her keyboard, jamming the network signal so no one could call for backup. The van doors opened. 2 masked men dragged out a child, no older than 10, bound and terrified. The sight sent fire through Michael's veins. He had seen enough. Now, he growled. The trap snapped shut. Lights flooded the yard, blinding the criminals. Michael's team stormed forward, shouting commands, weapons aimed. Chaos erupted, the buyers stumbled back, cursing, the masked men reached for guns, and Michael charged straight into the fight. The first masked man raised his weapon, Michael slammed him to the ground, disarming him with a single brutal strike. Another lunged with a knife, but one of Michael's old partners dropped him with a shot to the shoulder. Screams, gunfire, shouts, it was a storm of violence and rage. But through it all, Michael kept his eyes locked on the child. He fought like every punch, every kick, every bullet was for that boy. And then, silence. The last man fell, groaning, his weapon kicked away. The buyers were on their knees, their expensive suits now covered in dust and blood. Michael grabbed one by the collar, yanking him close. "You think the dark web hides you?" Michael's voice was ice. "Not anymore. Tonight, the world sees you for what you are." Sarah rushed forward, snapping photos, recording video. She streamed live to hidden servers, sending the evidence out before anyone could shut it down. Within minutes, the footage of the raid was reaching journalists, activists, and people hungry for truth. The child was safe. The buyers were caught. And for the first time, Michael felt like the tide was turning. But as he stood in that shipping yard, breathing hard, he knew this was only the beginning. Because Sarah still hadn't told him the name of the mole. The traitor inside the system. The shadow feeding the monsters. Michael looked at the blood on his hands, the boy clinging to his arm, and he whispered to himself, "I'm not stopping. Not until every last one of them is gone." And for you listening right now, if you feel that fire in your chest, if you believe in standing up when others stay silent, this story is for you. That's why I tell it here, on this channel. Join us, subscribe, and don't miss the next part, because what's coming will shake everything you thought you knew about justice, the dark web, and betrayal. Because the war for truth has only just begun. Every victory comes with a price. Michael knew at the moment he saw the child safe in his arms. Because monsters don't forgive. They strike back. And that night, they did. The attack came without warning. Michael had barely returned home. His wife had been holding their children so tightly, relief painted on her face. They thought, just for a moment, that maybe the nightmare was over. But as he stepped into the living room, Michael's instincts screamed. The silence was wrong. The air felt heavy, like a storm before the lightning. Then he saw it. A note taped to the window. A single line, written in black marker. "You saved one child. But can you save your own?" Before Michael could react, the phone rang. His wife jumped. Michael snatched it up, his voice hard. "Who is this?" A distorted voice answered. Cold. Mocking. "You think you've won, Hayes? You embarrassed us. You showed the world. But now the world will watch you suffer. Tonight, your family dies." Michael's blood turned to fire. He shouted into the phone, "If you touch them," but the line went dead. And then, outside, the sound of glass shattering. Masked men stormed the backyard, shadows moving fast. Michael rushed his family upstairs, his mind racing. He wasn't a cop right now. He wasn't even a soldier. He was just a father trying to save his family from the hell he had spent years fighting. The men broke through the door. His wife screamed. His children cried. Michael grabbed the baseball bat from the corner, his gun still locked away in the safe. No time. No backup. Just him. The first intruder rushed up the stairs. Michael swung hard. The crack echoed through the house as the man tumbled back, cursing. But there were more. Too many. Michael shoved his family into the attic crawl space, whispering, "Don't make a sound. No matter what." His eyes met his wife's. She nodded, holding the kids close, tears streaming down her face. The intruders tore through the house. Rooms overturned. Furniture smashed. They were searching, hunting. Michael hid in the hallway shadows, heart pounding, bat tight in his hands. And then, fate intervened. One of the men lit a flare to smoke him out, but the flame caught the curtain. Within seconds, fire spread across the wall, flames licking the ceiling. The men panicked. Smoke filled the house. Sirens wailed in the distance, neighbors had already called 911. The criminals fled into the night, coughing, shouting. Michael dragged his family out through the attic window, lowering them onto the garage roof. Firefighters arrived just as the house began to burn. They survived. Barely. But survival didn't feel like victory. Standing in the street, watching his home burn, Michael clenched his fists. His children were crying, his wife shaking, their lives ripped apart again. And in that fire, Michael made a silent vow. This would never happen again. He would end it. All of it. The crowd outside whispered, neighbors filming, news vans already rolling up. Sarah was there too, always there, her camera capturing every moment. She put a hand on Michael's shoulder, her voice trembling but strong. "Michael, the people need to see this. They need to know what these men are capable of. This isn't just your fight anymore. It's everyone's." Michael stared into the flames, his face glowing red with fury. "Then let's make sure the world sees everything. Let's drag them out of the dark web and into the light." And for those listening now, this is where the story turns into fire. This is the moment Michael Hayes stopped playing defense. If you believe in standing against evil, if you believe no family should ever live in fear, then don't just watch. Join this fight. Subscribe, share, and let this story spread, because the war is about to explode. Michael's family survived that night by chance. But he knew the next time, chance might not save them. The only way forward was to finish it. To expose the mole. To destroy the network. To burn the dark web empire to ashes. And that's exactly what he was about to do. The worst wounds don't come from your enemies. They come from the ones you trusted. And Michael Hayes was about to feel that cut deeper than any bullet or blade. The night after the fire, the city slept uneasy. News stations replayed the footage again and again, Michael's burning house, his terrified family, the proof that the monsters hiding in the dark web were real. But inside Sarah's apartment, far from the cameras, Michael sat across the table from her, waiting for the truth he had been chasing since the beginning. Sarah's laptop glowed between them, files scattered across the screen like broken glass. She had been quiet for too long. Finally, Michael slammed his hand on the table. "Enough, Sarah. You told me there's a mole. You told me someone inside fed them everything. Who is it?" Sarah's eyes flickered, full of pain, full of fear. She swallowed hard, her voice trembling. "Michael. I didn't tell you because I wanted proof. But now, after tonight, you deserve the truth. You've always deserved it." She tapped the keyboard, and a name appeared on the screen. Michael leaned forward, his heart pounding. His chest tightened as he read it. Captain Richard Monroe. Michael froze. His old captain. His mentor. The man who had pinned his badge on the day he first became a detective. The man who had taught him how to fight, how to protect, how to stand tall. "No," Michael whispered. "That's not possible." Sarah looked at him, tears in her eyes. "It's him, Michael. He's been on their payroll for years. He covered their trails, buried the reports, called off raids. He was the one who signed your suspension papers. He made you the scapegoat." Michael's hands shook. He remembered the way Monroe had looked at him in those last days, the way he had said, "Sometimes you have to let things go, Hayes." Now he understood what that really meant. Monroe hadn't been protecting the Force. He had been protecting himself. Protecting the dark web empire. Rage boiled inside him, but so did heartbreak. This wasn't just betrayal. This was family turning into the enemy. Michael stood, pacing, running his hands through his hair. "I trusted him. My kids called him Uncle Rich." His voice broke. And all this time, he was feeding them. Selling children. Selling lives. Sarah closed the laptop, her voice firm. "Michael, this is why I called you that first night. This is why I risked everything. Because you're the only one who can stop him. The only one who still cares enough to fight." Michael turned, his eyes burning with something beyond anger. Something sharper. Colder. Determined. "If Monroe wants a war," he said, his voice like steel, "then he'll get one. But I swear to you, Sarah, I'm not stopping until I drag him out of the shadows and show the whole world what he really is." Sarah nodded. "Then let's finish it. Together." And for those of you listening right now, this is the betrayal that makes every revenge story unforgettable. The kind of betrayal you can feel in your own chest. If you followed Michael's fight this far, don't stop now, because what's coming next is the storm, the showdown, the truth finally unmasked. Subscribe, share, and stay with us, because the final chapter is about to begin. Michael Hayes no longer doubted. He no longer feared. The man who had trained him was the man he now had to destroy. And for the first time, Michael didn't just want justice. He wanted the end. Every story has a moment where the mask comes off. And for Michael Hayes, that moment was now. The city's courthouse stood tall against the night sky, its stone walls a symbol of justice. But inside, justice had been sold, traded, buried by men like Captain Richard Monroe. And tonight, Michael was going to rip it all open. The plan was simple, but dangerous. Sarah had leaked enough evidence to stir the media into a frenzy. Protesters gathered outside the courthouse, holding signs, chanting for truth, for children, for Michael Hayes. Inside, Monroe was meeting with his allies, judges, politicians, men who had profited from the dark web network. They thought they were safe. Hidden. Protected. But Michael was already there. He moved like a shadow through the building, his team at his back. The same team who had stood with him when everyone else turned away. They weren't here for arrests. They weren't here for paperwork. They were here to end it. In the grand chamber, Monroe stood tall in his uniform, shaking hands with the men who had covered his crimes. His smile was smooth, his eyes calm. To the world, he was still Captain Monroe, a decorated officer. To Michael, he was a traitor wearing a badge soaked in blood. Michael stepped into the light. The room froze. Every head turned. And Monroe's smile faltered. "Well," Monroe said softly, his voice dripping with false calm, "if it isn't my fallen detective. Shouldn't you be hiding under the rubble of your burned home?" Michael's jaw tightened. He didn't raise his weapon. He didn't need to. His words cut sharper than steel. "I trusted you. My family trusted you. And all this time, you were selling children into hell. You framed me. You nearly destroyed me. But tonight, Monroe, the world sees you." Sarah stepped forward, her camera already live, broadcasting to thousands watching online. The files, the videos, the names, all streaming out into the world. Monroe's mask cracked. His calm turned to fury. He pulled a gun, pointing it straight at Michael. "You don't understand what you're doing. These people own this city. You think you can fight the system? You'll die trying." Michael didn't flinch. "Then I'll die standing." The standoff stretched thin, seconds hanging like hours. Monroe's finger tightened on the trigger. But before he could fire, one of Michael's old partners, the same officer Monroe had once commanded, stepped forward and aimed his weapon at Monroe. "No more," he said. "It ends tonight." Guns were raised across the room, tension exploding into chaos. Shouts, panic, fear. But in the end, Monroe was outnumbered. His allies fled, their power crumbling as the truth spilled across every news feed in the nation. Michael lunged, knocking the gun from Monroe's hand. The two men clashed, fists and fury, years of betrayal crashing into every blow. Monroe was bigger, stronger, but Michael fought with something more powerful than rage. He fought with love for his family, for the children stolen, for every life ruined by this man's greed. The fight ended with Monroe pinned to the ground, Michael's hands gripping his collar. "Look at me!" Michael shouted. "Look into my eyes. This is what justice feels like." Cameras captured it all. The crowd outside roared. And Monroe, once untouchable, now lay broken under the weight of truth. By sunrise, the network was exposed. Names released. Arrests made. The dark web empire shattered. And Michael Hayes, once suspended, once disgraced, was invited back to the force, not as a broken man, but as a hero. When the chief placed the badge back into his hand, Michael didn't smile. He only whispered, "This time, I wear it for them. For the ones we failed. And for those of you listening now, this is why I tell these stories. Because truth matters. Because courage matters. And because even in the darkest corners of the web, light can break through. If this story hit your heart, don't just walk away. Subscribe, share, stand with us. Because more stories wait in the shadows, and together, we can bring them into the light. Michael Hayes was no longer just a detective. He was proof that one man's fight could shake the system. Proof that evil, no matter how deep it hides, can still be dragged into the sun. And that was his revenge.